Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Atlantic Council Conversations at the IMF headquarters here in Washington, D.C. Thank you for joining us remotely. I am Perrihan Al-Riffai. I'm a senior economist and author to a newly released report by the Atlantic Council on the social and economic costs of the war in Gaza on MENA economies. I'm especially honored today to be joined by my esteemed guest, His Excellency, Minister Amin Salam, Minister of Economy and Trade for Lebanon. Welcome, Your Excellency, and thank you very much for joining us.
Pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you. Before we start, I would like to first offer my sincere condolences to yourself and to the Lebanese people for the devastating human toll that is a result of the ongoing conflict right now.
Thank you.
And we'll start by really checking in with you, and maybe you can share with us. Lebanon's socioeconomic challenges are considerable, starting with the financial crisis in 2018, followed by the impact of the COVID pandemic, and then after that, the cost of living crisis brought on by the supply chain crisis, but also by the Ukraine war. And now an escalating war that is threatening lives, livelihoods, and displaced more than 1.3 million people in Lebanon. Can you please share with us how you determine your policy priorities under these extremely difficult conditions? And share with us how your priorities may have changed now in light of the very recent developments.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a great pleasure to be with the Atlantic Council discussing really the situation in Lebanon. As you mentioned, Lebanon has witnessed a sequence of different challenges, different things that really happened to Lebanon that directly hit the socioeconomic scene, hit the country from an economical perspective, as far as it relates to not just the war. You started with the COVID pandemic, moving into the collapse of the economy, the financial system, the banks, as well. It's noted to mention the Beirut port explosion that destroyed half of the city, killing hundreds of people. That as well had a major impact. And the last layer of challenge was the beginning of the Gaza war about a year ago, and the massive escalation the past month that turned the war from Gaza to the Lebanon front. Definitely there is no economy in the world that can really tolerate or that can handle so many different challenges, so many different major hits within such a small amount of time, or such a short amount of time. Leaving Lebanon today with a full-scale war, over, as you mentioned, 1.3 million displaced people, and that relates to unemployment, that relates to the destruction of businesses, that relates to the complete destruction of the only viable sectors that Lebanon was breathing some oxygen through, having some cash flow in the economy, which were the tourism and the agricultural sector, that were really the oxygen of the economy for the past 3 years. They were the only two sectors that brought in cash into the country and put food on people's tables and created jobs. Now, my biggest concern as Minister of Economy today is really, first of all, the priorities shifted during our meetings with the World Bank, IMF executives and delegates and different groups. We were really having a discussion today about a country in war and a country and an economy post-conflict. While a few months ago, we were looking at reform and recovery. We were looking at ratifying a number of laws. We were looking at a deal with the IMF. Now everything changed. Now we're looking at mass destruction. We're looking at major humanitarian aid needed, emergency aid needed, and economic aid needed to bring back Lebanon at least to where it was. Because the size of destruction today, weighed very heavy on the entire infrastructure, on the system in Lebanon. And we are thinking now of reconstruction, getting people back to their homes, aiding those people at least for the next 2, 3 years, because we all know that displacement of that size within that short time is really unprecedented. And it will require a lot of time to get back people to a safe place after a ceasefire and a peace process and then a reconstruction process. So we did some estimates as a government. Just yesterday we updated the numbers. Lebanon today needs about $250 million monthly just to handle the emergency situation and the displaced people, to cover the cost of shelter and food and health aid. That is about $3 billion every year. And that will definitely take at least 2 to 3 years to be able to manage all this emergency plan and get people at least to survive until we transition into the reconstruction phase. So that is the direct cost now for the emergency plan. That is not to mention that we had as well assessed a rough number today of $20 billion direct and indirect losses on the economy and on the infrastructure. That includes destruction of over 4,000 buildings, including industries, businesses, residential homes, and areas in the north and the south. On top of that, one of our major concerns as far as it relates to food security, which is always a very alarming topic, most of the lands in the south of Lebanon and the Bekaa area that have always been the food basket of Lebanon and the money-making sector as well for exporting all the goods to be able to generate some trade and generate income to the country, have all been destroyed. I would say, when I say all, about 90%. Specifically, the soil, all the olive trees, which was the most important tree that Lebanon really, exports to the world due to the many products that come out of olive trees. So we did as well a study in the Ministry of Agriculture, and we realized that the rehabilitation of those farmlands and growing back the same amount of trees will require a very, very long time. We're talking about a process that would take 5 to 10 years. And this is a serious issue as far as food security for Lebanon, for the needs of the country, the internal consumption, and the trade operations that we used to do.
No, thank you very much, Your Excellency. You definitely, the situation was as you mentioned, you rightly mentioned, was complicated before. This adds a completely different layer of complexity that is really quite challenging. You do mention the $250 million that is needed per month to just take care of basic needs, humanitarian needs. Recently in Paris, there was a conference, an international conference, and there was a pledge, exactly, for, there were pledges for $1 billion, correct? And I was wondering, Your Excellency, when is there a schedule for the disbursements? Because these are pledges, schedule, when should they start? Because the need is quite immediate.
Well, thanks for bringing this topic up, because it's the conference in Paris that took place yesterday. We were really relying a lot on the outcome of that conference, because we realized that the first responders, if we want to call them, that helped Lebanon when the war waged heavy on Lebanon and we started having major displacement numbers and destruction, we had a lot of countries that began helping Lebanon through sending aid by airplanes, including medical aid, including food aid, including shelter needs. But all that didn't total up to 5 or 10% of the needs.
Yeah.
That's why it's important what happened yesterday as a beginning or as a starting point for the many more needs we have to be able to manage this crisis. The $1 billion had as well 200 million out of the amount was dedicated to the Lebanese armed forces because part of our ceasefire operations and compliance with 1701 is to strengthen the army, to be able to send the army to the borders and create the safe and peaceful zone until we get to an entire full peace process. So this number was significant. It sent a lot of positive messages through all the donor countries that were attending the conference. And there were definitely a lot of discussions that those types of conferences to support Lebanon will continue, will be hosted by other countries, friendly countries to Lebanon in the future. Now, we took as well the opportunity while we are at the IMF and World Bank to really give the numbers that I shared some of them now. So all the key players, including the management in the IMF and the World Bank, can be advocates for Lebanon on all the different platforms where they have influence in the next few weeks or months coming. Because the support of all those organizations is very important. The humanitarian aid that we are pushing for is not the solution. The solution is the ceasefire. That is our biggest message today, that we're trying to push very hard, that we want a serious discussion and a decision on the ceasefire. Because so far, we have felt that most of the players are not taking a definitive, strong position to support a ceasefire, whether it's in Gaza or in Lebanon. Because already the damage has been done, a lot of damage has been done that would require a lot of money and a lot of time. But the more we extend this war, the wider the scope gets, or the more it gets aggressive, the more the needs are, the more the billions will accumulate that we will need in emergency help, in humanitarian aid, and in economic aid, because that is reaching every single aspect of the country.
You're absolutely, and actually it's a good thing you brought this up, because I'm going to try and if you could give us a comparison before, on what was needed in terms of financial assistance before this escalation and now. For instance, I know that and not just reconstruction, but also for economic assistance. Earlier this year, the World Bank assessed damages and losses in the most conflict-affected areas in the south of Lebanon. And it was estimated that as of July, $750 million of that worth of damages and losses were needed. But now, of course, as we all know, the conflict has escalated, and now
absolutely.
it's exactly. So if we compare what would have been needed in terms of financial assistance before this escalation, to bring the Lebanese economy back on track, and now after the reconstruction or after the conflict, and really provided the ceasefire happens immediately also,
That's right.
Because the longer the conflict remains, the more destruction there will be. How can you give us a comparison?
So let's divide it into two phases. So there was the phase that we were going through as a government, where we were working with the IMF on potentially having an IMF package, an IMF deal, where the IMF would give Lebanon about $3 billion to kickstart the economy, to do certain reforms towards the economy, to do certain, to ratify certain laws through our parliament. And then the number of $3 billion was considered a stamp of approval that the IMF will give to the international community, that there is trust in the Lebanese system, there is trust in and seriousness in working on a full-scale economic plan for the years ahead, where we can really think about growth, we can think about GDP, we can think about new sectors, and following that, the final thing that we are all looking forward for was foreign investment. So that was the normal path we were looking at from a perspective of a country that had an economic meltdown. Now, the second phase, which is no more than a few months old now, even less than that, really flipped the equation 180 degrees. So we were a country that was looking for economic reforms, restructuring its banking system, pumping cash in the country, waiting for the IMF to finalize a deal so we can have as well more countries support and invest in Lebanon, because the $3 billion was just a kickstart. It would not solve the entire economic situation in Lebanon. However, since that didn't happen, and then you had the war being waged on Lebanon heavily, destructing, as I mentioned, thousands of buildings that include many businesses, destroying all the viable sectors, and getting unemployment rates to jump to unprecedented numbers. We're looking today over 60% unemployment. We had an increase of about 25% unemployment just within the past month, because the working force in the displaced people constitutes about 35% of the working force in Lebanon, mostly farmers and people who work in certain industries related to agricultural production, etc., etc. So today we are really looking at a completely different problem. We are looking at a country that needs to be rebuilt at a big cost. So the numbers that the World Bank put that were close to, let's say, $1 billion assessment, that was before the war was really heavy on Lebanon. That was before the destruction of villages and cities and hospitals, and even targeting now, the last week, the city of Beirut, and now targeting certain trade avenues like the borders between Lebanon and Syria. There are concerns to target more infrastructure like airports or ports. So that has really increased significantly, first of all, the cost of damage due to this destruction. And that's why when we assessed the cost of damage, including the cost of economy, including all the other expenses, we were at a rough number yesterday of $20 billion. So, and that number is prone to increase fast. If that war keeps going on the same pace, it can double up in less than a month. So that is what, but that will take Lebanon to a very tough place to come back from as well, because the challenges will become bigger. The time needed to heal and recover and reconstruct will need more time as well. So that's why we're pushing for a ceasefire now with all the serious players, particularly the Arab nations that are embracing Lebanon today due to the fact that Lebanon has no president, has a lot of weak points on the international arena, and needs really an aid from close countries, friendly countries that care to preserve that beautiful country that always had a democratic system, that always had a mosaic of a very different approach in the Middle East. So everybody understands that we don't want to lose this country. So we are pushing really hard to get to the ceasefire, to avoid escalation and having the numbers quadruple or become really very difficult, because we know that the world as well is busy with the war in Ukraine. We know that there are other issues all over the place. So the more we control the damage, the more we manage this crisis, the sooner we do that, the better.
Very rightly put, absolutely. And to that, so let me ask you, are there concrete plans for the day after reconstruction or support? Are there concrete donors and strategic partners who have really pledged to support Lebanon as soon as the ceasefire, and we hope it soon, actually takes place?
Well, I mean, that is definitely a very, very critical, thing to really work on at this stage. However, for us as a government, believe it or not, we've been very stressed with managing the emergency plan, catering the needs of people that are displaced for the past few months, that just part of the government now, including myself as a Minister of Economy and Trade, are visiting different countries. Part of the visit to the World Bank, IMF, or to Washington, D.C. as well is to spend some time with the U.S. administration and serious diplomatic channels that are based in Washington, D.C., to really talk about where do they see Lebanon. Now, the messages have been very positive, but you know that after all that, Lebanon will be a country of opportunities. Lebanon will be at a better place, with the understanding that this war will end, and then there will be a big reconstruction project, a big economic movement. So that is all nice so far as talk, but that cannot be accomplished unless we have serious diplomatic efforts to stop the war and really start working with organizations like the IMF, financial institutions like the IMF or the World Bank Group on different programs. And I've had a number of meetings outside the regular agenda or the regular schedule of the World Bank IMF, looking into specific departments in the World Bank and IMF that cater for countries post-conflict with different programs, with different grants, because Lebanon as well in this situation now cannot afford loans anymore. We're seeking serious programs of grants that will help us bring back the economy, that will help us recover socially, that will help us reconstruct what was destructed. And it's going to be really a massive project. It's going to be, and there's going to be a lot of money needed. The first estimates, as we talked, are 20 billion. But I think once we have all the specific numbers after a more targeted survey, I think we're going to be needing much more than that.
And that's provided there is immediate ceasefire as well. And
Yeah,
then
that provided the
Exactly.
war doesn't go beyond the
It's not
scope that
prolonged.
it is in now.
Exactly. No. And so I don't even know if it's can I even ask you, for instance, your mandate as Minister of Economy and Trade, whether or not you're able to support through your mandate, especially given that the banking sector, unfortunately, is really not functioning as a credit source for
That's
economic activity. How are you able to help your economy, especially trade and, for instance, SMEs, in moving forward?
Yeah, that is one major challenge for my mandate as Minister of Economy and Trade. And if I'm to take the trade part, the trade part of my responsibility, the thing that is, I always say, thank God now still functioning, is because we have our ports and airports still open. So our trade cycle is still going normal. We are still being able to import and export, most importantly, import all the needs for the Lebanese people. But the big concern is the cash flow in the economy and the reserves in our central bank now, because we are spending a lot on import, but there is no money coming from sources that we used to have before, like the viable sectors I mentioned. So the concern of timing is that this continues to stretch, and then we keep spending without income. Then we will get to a place where we will tap into our critical reserve, and that is unhealthy for the economy. In parallel to that, as Minister of Economy, I have serious concerns about SMEs, about many businesses that were in the process of starting or already started because they saw some recovery early 2023 before everything went bad in Gaza and Lebanon. So all those businesses today are in jeopardy. A lot of them shut down. A lot of them are dysfunctional. A lot of them decided not to continue their operations. What we are doing at the ministry now that is very important is we did a program with UNDP, and now we're plugging in the World Bank, where we created a platform, online platform, that we will be receiving feedback from all the SMEs, from all the businesses, whether they are small, medium, even large, to put all their input as far as what is their loss, how many employees they lost, what do they need to come back, what type of help do they need, legal, financial, you name it, technical, then this data will get us ready by the time we are looking at a ceasefire or at a peace process. We will be able to come to all the international organizations and say, look, we have gathered all this data through this platform, and we need legal assistance here, we need financing here, we need, that is very important. So we're doing that now, and I think that will be very important to let those businesses survive or transition through this difficult time, and then help them come back when things are in better shape.
Your Excellency, you have a daunting task. However, the fact that Lebanon has, the Friends of Lebanon are quite, there are a lot of Friends of Lebanon. We are truly hopeful that first of all, a ceasefire is immediate and lasting, and that the Friends of Lebanon actually do step up and help Lebanon overcome these really polycrises, right? It's not just one crisis after another that unfortunately has ended with an escalating conflict within the country. So we are really very grateful that you joined us today.
Oh, my pleasure.
And you shared the dynamics, the current events that are happening. We wish you all the luck in your mandate. We wish the Lebanese people all the luck. And we hope that the next time we meet, that you are able to share with us some positive stories of how Lebanon is actually back on the path to growth and development.
Well, I thank you. I thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for your kind words. And hopefully, yes, hopefully the Friends of Lebanon will realize that this is really a historic moment for Lebanon, a historic time where Lebanon needs most today the Friends of Lebanon to stand by Lebanon and help us really transition and save Lebanon from this very, very challenging and dark place that we are heading towards.
We truly hope so. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. We are happy to have His Excellency, and we look forward to more conversations in the future. Thank you very much.